In this nugget, we discuss installation, and in particular, we'll be focusing on upgrades, and this is in comparison to something like a clean install. When we take a look at upgrades, though, there's a lot of different considerations to keep in mind. A big part of that, for example, is making sure that the user's existing applications are compatible with the new version of Windows that you want to install. And of course, with an upgrade, the user has an existing version of Windows, and you want to upgrade that to a more recent or better version. And then we'll take a look also at transferring settings. They may have certain shortcuts on the desktop or certain preferences in their interface that they would like to retain, maybe application preferences, for example, as well. Well, how do you transfer all that stuff, as well as their data? That has to be backed up, but it also needs to be moved over to where the user is going to be working, or at least made available for the user. We also take a look here at upgrade paths. You have to be able to know what versions of Windows you can upgrade to a more recent version, or more current version. For example, can you upgrade Windows 95 to Windows Vista? Well, you can't. So you have to know what you would have to do if you wanted to do something like that. We also take a look at the hardware requirements, and of course, those are big issues as well, because you have to make sure that there's sufficient system resources on the computer so that it can handle the new version of Windows that you want to put on it. I just got back from a wonderful family vacation in, of course, sunny Orlando, Florida. It seems like a lot of families take their vacations down there because of all the amusement parks and whatnot. And my family usually goes to Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure down there. But this year we decided to do that and also add on something a little bit different. We decided to go indoor skydiving. And here's a photograph of my son doing this indoor skydiving. It's pretty cool. They have these turbo fans up at the top of a big funnel, and it draws in so much air that actually you can float pretty much on a cloud of air is what's going on here. And it was quite a lot of fun, and you feel a little bit out of control every now and then because the slightest motion with the way you cup your hands or the way you move your legs or whatever can send you careening into the plexiglass walls of this big funnel that you're in. And sometimes it kind of can feel the same way when you're working with different versions of Windows. Because, number one, there are a number of different versions of Windows. You have to know which one is the correct version for you to get for your clients. You also have to know some things about proper installation. And so we're going to address some of those things here in this nugget. Much of the time when you actually perform an installation, you're going to be doing an upgrade as opposed to a clean install. Of course, an upgrade meaning that there's already an existing operating system on that computer, and you just upgrade it to the latest version. For example, upgrading from Windows XP to Windows Vista. That would be an upgrade. You could also alternatively do a clean install, which many people have preferred in the past because it seems to give you a clean slate, so to speak. So in other words, if I had problems with Windows XP and certain instabilities or something like that, who's to say that I wouldn't just inherit those same instabilities when I upgraded to Windows Vista? Whereas there's some chance that if I just format the hard drive and wipe it out and then do a clean install of Windows Vista, that maybe I'll eliminate some of those problems. No guarantees, but it is kind of nice to have a clean start, and some people are purists that way and kind of want to do that. However, it's not always practical for our users or for the corporation. And it's not always desirable for the home user either. Because if you do an upgrade like we're looking at here, you get to retain all your settings, or at least most of them. So if you had some shortcuts on the desktop, they'll still be there. If you had some photographs in the pictures folder, they'll still be there. My documents, all that stuff is still there. So it's much less disruptive to do an upgrade as opposed to a clean install. Of course, if you're going to do an upgrade, you need to have several things considered here before you actually perform that upgrade. One of those things is that you want to have the sufficient hardware for the new operating system. If you need more memory, more CPU power, more hard drive space, a better video card, all those sorts of things. Now, of course, that's going to be true whether it's a clean install or an upgrade, but if you're doing an upgrade, you can also use something called the Upgrade Advisor. And this is available, for example, if you're going to perform a Windows XP to Windows Vista upgrade. For example, here I've got Windows, what is this? This is Windows XP, isn't it? And you can kind of tell by the green start menu, and plus it'll say on here Tour XP and so forth. But anyway, this is Windows XP. If I wanted to upgrade to Windows Vista, I would really rather not start the upgrade process and then find out that there was some catastrophic problem that would prevent the upgrade process from completing successfully. What's supposed to happen is, if it gets stopped partway through, it should roll back and give you exactly the same operating system you had before you started the upgrade process. But I don't always want to put all of my faith in that, because for all I know, it could still leave you in kind of an uncertain position where something is partially installed but not quite removed either. And that's where something like the Upgrade Advisor comes in. You can see here I've already downloaded the file that we can use to install this. You just go to Microsoft's website here, and you can make note of it. But I just Googled it, or I just looked at the Search Microsoft field up here, and I found the Windows Vista Upgrade Advisor. And this is what I would need if I wanted to check out in advance whether or not I had some potential upgrade problems that could halt the upgrade, or that would be just notes of caution. And then what you can do is once you've got it installed, you can go ahead and launch it, and I've got a shortcut for the desktop here. I've already launched it and run it, and now we can see here that we have the scan has now been complete. Also, it does show you some of the various features of the various editions of Windows Vista, the Home Basic, the Business, Home Premium, and Ultimate. Now, what we're really interested in here is actually seeing the details for the Upgrade Advisor. And this would tell me then if there were any exclamation points, which would just be cautionary notes. The upgrade will probably still go through okay, but just something to keep in mind. There would also be a red X, and that would be the thing that would be a showstopper. Let's see what I got down here. Okay, so system requirements. I might not have all of the system requirements. What are the details of that? I don't even know. I haven't looked at this yet. Well, the DVD video card. Okay, that would be a big one. I would probably not be able to use Windows Aero, particularly because, although you can't tell by looking, this is actually a virtual machine, and I don't really have it jazzed up with enough video performance. Also doesn't have enough memory either here. It's only got 512 megabytes of RAM. I need at least a gigabyte of RAM if I want to get, again, that Windows Aero experience and get all the snazzy graphics and what have you. There was some other stuff here too, wasn't there? Oh yeah. The other things that we have, I think I saw something else here, would be that I think it doesn't have the programs that it needs. Oh yeah, right here it is. Semantic Antivirus Client. I was kind of suspicious of that. This is the icon down here in the notification area for Semantic Antivirus, which is actually a really good product. But this is a really old one. So there's a much more current version of the antivirus client that's currently available. And so that's kind of some information there. This might just be stuff I need to check out and double check to see whether or not it's going to be a showstopper in the upgrade process. But anyway, that's one of the things you'd want to check out is the hardware. Of course, the Upgrade Advisor also checks the applications. That's why it identified Norton's, or rather Semantic Antivirus as a potential problem. So it'll check for compatibility with the new operating system. And there may also be some privilege issues. Can't always detect all of the privilege issues, but some applications require that you are logged on as an administrator when you run them. These are particularly older applications that were designed for Windows NT 4, because back in those days, it was more common for users, the average user, to be installed, or rather to be logged on as an administrator. It's really not an advisable security practice, and it's fallen out of favor with nearly every other version of Windows. Nevertheless, some of the older applications were installed were designed for NT4 and might be a problem now because you'd have to have your users logged on as administrators. So something to look out for there. Also, stability. There might just be a stability problem with some of those applications that, again, the Upgrade Advisor might know about. Or you may have to check out documentation from your application vendor to see if it needs a patch or an update or an incremental version update before it can have the upgrade. And very often this will take weeks or even months until after the new operating system has come out before the vendors have a chance to catch up and fully do their testing and everything. So you might have to wait a little while if it's a mission-critical application for your company. Also, you can check out network issues. What this really relates to when we're talking about the network here is that you may have something like a proprietary client or something like that that was installed on a previous version of Windows. It might not be compatible with the next version of Windows. So you wouldn't want to upgrade, hundreds of computers from Windows XP to Windows Vista, but then when you're done, you find out that Windows Vista is not compatible with that network client, and they're all cut off from the network. That could really ruin your whole day. Also, do back up your data in advance. Now, if it's on an individual user basis or a home user or something like that, that's not too terribly hard. You can just identify where the data is, and you can even just drag and drop it to a USB flash drive or an external USB drive or something like that. Might be real easy. On a more of a corporate scale, we do try to make sure that all the users use something called a home directory in many cases. This means that all of their data is actually stored on a network server somewhere, and then we just back up that network server every night so we have a good copy of those users' data. But regardless, do make sure that you back up the important data before you perform an upgrade one way or the other. Also, there may be additional components. And this would, of course, simply be the things that you can add or remove also at a later point in time if you want to. But this might be like, whether or not I want to install the games or not, or whether or not I want to install IIS, which is usually not a good idea on a client computer, but at least the option is there. So it's that type of thing that you can also decide whether or not you want to include in the upgrade. So when it comes to actually keeping our data, we talked about an upgrade already, but sometimes you can't really just do an upgrade. And for that reason, you might need to do a clean install instead. Now, by doing a clean install, that doesn't mean I want to throw away all of my data. How am I going to keep all of that stuff? Well, you could do what I mentioned earlier. You could create a backup, but that doesn't always back up everything. Number one, there might be areas of data that I forgot about, or number two, it can also be there are various settings and preferences that I have that I want to keep. I don't want to have to reconstruct my whole desktop and the way I do my interface and everything. So, although you're not able to always keep every single setting, there's some tools here that will allow you to keep many of them, including very often much of the data as well. And this is going to be how we're going to transfer our user settings and our data. Okay. Now, the way this would work, for example, is if I started off with the Windows 9X, 95 or 98, or Windows 2000, and I wanted to upgrade from one of those operating systems over to Windows XP, then I could use something called FAST, or the File and Settings Transfer Wizard. So if I wanted to use the File and Settings Transfer Wizard, I would simply put in the Windows XP CD into the tray, and then here I'm on Windows 2000, and then I would double-click on that CD drive letter, which we can see right here. It prompts me if I want to install Windows XP, but not yet. In this case, I need to perform some additional tasks, like I need to transfer files and settings. So by doing this and clicking on Next, then I'm going to identify the files that I have that I want to transfer over, any preferential settings that I have, and so forth. And I have to specify how I want to transfer them to my new computer. For example, I might be already connected by the serial ports between these computers. Okay, that's kind of an old-fashioned way of doing it. Back in the days of Windows 2000, we a lot of times had serial ports, and we might not have even had USB ports back then. Wow. A floppy drive. Can you imagine transferring all of your data by a floppy drive? That would be a mess. But you could do that, or some other removable media. Or you could choose a network location. For example, I've got a server over here, and I could create a file and settings transfer directory over there, for example. I think it'll prompt me if I don't have it. Yeah, so I need to go ahead and create that. And then I could say files and settings, or I could choose a customized list if I want to checkbox each one of these items as well. But then I would just go ahead and click on Next. And then what you would see happen next is that once it's complete, you'll see all the settings in that File and Settings Transfer Wizard directory. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Exit out of this. Then I'm going to go look at that directory. So that would be DC1, Home, Fast is the directory there. And then we can see here that it's got the User State Migration Tool settings here. That's another way of describing that. And it's got some of the various settings that are included in this. Now, there's not a lot there because this is a clean install of Windows 2000. I really haven't done anything with it. So there's not that many settings, not that much data, all that sort of thing. But all I would do then is once I've installed my Windows XP installed a clean install of Windows XP, it might be on a completely different computer, or I might plan to format this whole hard drive and start from scratch, thereby removing all of my data and all of my settings. Then what I need to do is, once I've installed the new Windows XP operating system, then I can again use the File and Settings Transfer Wizard to bring the data back over to my new installation. Now then, once I had installed, maybe this is a clean install of Windows XP, but I wanted to bring over the settings that I had from Windows 2000, then I could go to All Programs, Accessories, System Tools, and then down here to the File and Settings Transfer Wizard, and you just kind of next your way through this. This is my new computer that does not have all the files and settings I want, so I need to get those. So I'll click on Next. Then this is a firewall setting. Here, what it does is it identifies this particular application as wanting to access something through the firewall. In this case, I could choose Unblock since it's an application that I know and that I trust. Otherwise, I might not. But here we're okay with it. So then it says, what do I want to do with this? Well, it's prompting me here that if the old computer is still available and it hasn't been formatted yet, for example, then I can run a wizard over on that one to start transferring the settings. You already saw me do that. I already have the data that I need. So I'm just going to skip right to the end here and then click on Next. Then I can specify the location for all of that data. That was DC1, Home, Fast. And then I'll click on Next. Now it's going to go ahead and bring in all of those settings. Now, there's not a lot to see because they were both pretty clean installations, but this is how you would bring things in so you would not lose any of your settings or data. And so then here what I've done is the end of the wizard will ask you to log off and log back on again to bring in the settings. Again, there wasn't really all that much there to begin with, but do notice this icon right here. In Windows 2000, let me switch back over to that one. Notice that there was a connect to the internet shortcut on the desktop. Now there's other icons, but none of them are shortcuts. But notice that it transferred that shortcut over here to Windows XP, so that if I wanted to keep that same exact icon, then I could go ahead and do that. Now, of course, we probably will have more productive shortcuts than just that one, but that just does illustrate the fact that the File and Settings Transfer Wizard did bring something over. Now, if I'm upgrading from Windows XP to Windows Vista, I'll use the Windows Easy Transfer Wizard instead. And the way this works is I would just be in Windows XP like I am right here, and I'd put in the Windows Vista DVD, and it has that wizard directly on it. So here's the DVD by double-clicking on it. I'll let autoplay do its thing, and then I'll transfer files and settings from another computer. By clicking on this, it launches the wizard, and then I simply specify what it is that I want. Now, this kind of assumes in the beginning, this is just an introduction, in the beginning that both computers are currently turned on and available. And if that's the case, I can use an easy transfer cable, which is kind of a crossover cable that I can use to connect the two computers together, and then it will just transfer them over that cable. It's kind of a strange thing because really it's just a simple crossover USB cable where the send and receive wires are switched over, and yet various companies charge an arm and a leg for that USB cable. It's just kind of crazy. But you can also transfer directly using a network connection. So if they're both on the network, then you don't have to buy the extra cable. That might be a more preferred way to go. And then you can also use a CD, DVD, or other removable media. What this leaves out is that you can also use a network path. But if you click it, you'll see that you can. Now, again, this assumes that both computers are alive and on the network right now. This is my old computer, for example. I'm looking at Windows XP right now, and I want to use this tool from the Windows Vista DVD to transfer over to a new Windows Vista installation that's somewhere else, okay? But if that's not the case, maybe this is my old computer that I want to save my settings from. I can click there, and notice that I can use a CD, USB flash drive, or an external hard disk or network location. I'm going to go ahead and select that last option, and again, I'm going to go to, see, what was that, DC1, Home, and then let's make this one the Windows Easy Transfer. You can also use a password that's advisable because you might have sensitive data that you don't want to be easily accessible to prying eyes. I don't think I typed these passwords in right. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's right. Then we go ahead and click on Next. And then we can choose all user accounts, files, and settings, only mine, and then advanced options would allow you to pick and choose by checkbox which items you wanted. Okay, I'm just going to leave all of these selected, but you can see how you can easily select or deselect each individual item. So go ahead and let that do its thing, and then I would have all of those settings in the destination. And then if I were to format this hard drive on Windows XP, which is what I'm currently using for my operating system, then at a later time, I could go into that file and settings, rather to the Windows Easy Transfer Wizard, and then I could bring all those settings back from the server that I'm saving all this information to. Now, I don't think this is an A+ exam objective, so I'm not going to elaborate on it too much, but in corporations you might have multiple migrations where you're not just doing one home user's computer or migrating settings from a laptop to a desktop or something like that. Instead, you might have dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of users and their settings that you might need to transfer over. Sometimes those are such big jobs, it's really not practical to have all of your users retain all of their settings, their cute little kitty cat wallpaper, and all of their cute little shortcuts to, Amazon.com and online shopping that they put on their desktop. All those sorts of things. So, the data, of course, is going to be important, and normally corporations will take other measures to make sure that the user's data is protected and backed up regularly. However, for those little preferential things, you might not always be able to retain those things. Nevertheless, if you want to give it a go, you can use something called the User State Migration Tool. This is a command line tool, and I'm just letting you know what it's about. The command line tool that you can use, and it can be run in batches or scripts of some type, and then you can set it up so that all the users, when they log on the next morning, it will run this script, copy all of their settings to a network location that you've specifically designated to receive all of this information. And then you'll have a copy of all that data, so that at a later point in time when you do an upgrade of their machines, then you'll be able to restore that data using the same tool. In order to do this, you need to be upgrading from here over to here. So I could upgrade, for example, Windows 2000 to Windows XP, or Windows 2000 to Windows Vista. Or I could go from XP to XP. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, it might be that I'm kind of doing a lateral move there. Maybe I've got a XP desktop, but I want to move all of the settings over to my XP, laptop, for example. Same thing would be with Vista, a Vista to Vista upgrade here as well. Or I could go XP to Vista as well. So you can see anything on this side can be migrated to anything on this side using the User State Migration tool. Now let's take a look also at the upgrade paths that you have available. And I also have some links that I think are going to help this out a little bit as well. And this is not exhaustive, but this will cover the main things that you'll probably need to know about here. For example, let's go back to old and crusty Windows 95. It's hard to believe how far back that is. It's 15 years ago at the time of this recording that Windows 95 came out. Anyway, if I wanted to go from Windows 95 to, say, Windows XP Home, how could I do that? Well, you can't. You can't do this upgrade directly. What I would have to do is, if I really wanted an upgrade, I'd have to upgrade from 95 to at least Windows 98 Special Edition or Windows 98 SE. Then once I've got this operating system installed, then I could upgrade that to Windows XP Home. So it's kind of a roundabout or a leapfrog kind of an upgrade. The only other option that I would have would be to do a clean install, and that would of course mean then that I would wipe out or format this hard drive and do a clean install of Windows XP Home, which really wouldn't be an upgrade at all. Then the other thing that I might have is Windows NT4. Again, that's kind of a decremented or obsolete operating system in most cases. I haven't seen it for years, except for yesterday. I went to my eye doctor, and they were checking me for glaucoma. Thankfully, everything's fine. But they did a special test where it was beyond that thing where they just put the scope on your eyeball and they look inside to look at your optic nerve. It was some other specialized test that looked at the thickness of the optic nerve. Anyway, I know that's more information than you want to know about my eyeball. However, they were actually using NT4. Apparently, the application that does that has never been updated, and so they're still stuck with NT4. The first time I've seen NT4 probably in 7 or 8 years at least. Anyway, I can upgrade from NT4 to Windows XP, no problem. Okay, just keep that in mind. I would keep all these things in mind. Windows 2000. What if I want to upgrade from Windows 2000 to Windows XP? Key thing to remember there, you'll use the WinNT32 executable on the Windows XP CD-ROM. I don't think this is as big an emphasis as it used to be, but the emphasis there used to be that if you want to do a clean install, you use the WinNT.exe executable. If you want to do an upgrade, you use what I've got right here, WinNT32.exe upgrade for Windows XP. For Windows 2000 to upgrade to Windows Vista, I would use the setup utility. We don't have WinNT and WinNT32 anymore with Windows Vista. It's got a whole different kind of a setup routine. Now, this is also important. If I want to upgrade from XP, I can do that. I can upgrade to Windows Vista quite easily. Windows Vista is designed to accept that upgrade. It actually works pretty well. One thing to keep in mind, though, and I don't think you'll see a lot of users that have this, but there is the XP tablet PC. This is kind of like the Macintosh iPad, except that it's nowhere near as good. It's heavier, it's bulkier, and it's less stable, in my opinion, in most cases. Okay, but anyway, this was kind of a precursor to the iPad, same kind of a concept, with, of course, different features. But anyway, there was an XP tablet that was in use, and it was, you could use a stylus to use handwriting, and it would use the handwriting to text recognition, that it could translate that for you and so forth. I did see some doctors' offices use this to transport from one patient room to the next, and so instead of taking their clipboard and all the paper, they'd use this XP tablet. Anyway, the important part of this is that the XP tablet, what if I want to upgrade to Windows Vista? You can do that, but I would have to upgrade from the XP tablet operating system, it's its own operating system there, to Windows Vista Ultimate Edition or Windows Vista Business Edition. Now, there is finally one other option. I can go to Windows Vista Home Premium Edition. It also does support tablet PCs, but Home, let me write that up here, Home Premium Edition, that's what that is, Home Premium Edition, requires a clean install. I cannot do an upgrade. I'd have to do a clean install if I wanted to use that tablet and Windows Vista. But again, Business and Ultimate will support an upgrade. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that an upgrade you always do from within your current operating system. So I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily pick out one of these. Okay, here's my Windows XP, for example. If I want to upgrade to Windows Vista, I would double-click on this, and there's my Windows Vista CD. I would choose Install Now, and then off I would go. If I were to do a clean install, then what I would do is I would boot from that DVD instead, and then you can specify in the setup routine that you want to do a clean install. It would then wipe out everything that's on the hard drive and start from scratch. Whereas doing what I'm doing right here would allow me to do an upgrade instead. And then as long as I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and complete this upgrade. And I'm just going to do this pretty quickly because this is fairly intuitive. I don't think most of you will have a hard time with this. I do recommend that you download at least the trial version of the version of Windows that you want to practice on, and you can get most of those from Microsoft without having to pay for them. And so then you'll download those and then just test them out. Do a couple of installations, get your feet wet with trying out the interface with a few of these, and you'll be good to go. You can go online to get the latest updates for installation. This is not things such as the security updates and things of this nature. These are updates that would assist the installation process. So, for example, if there was some bug or something like that that prevented the installation from proceeding properly with your hardware, maybe Microsoft was aware of that and they came out with a fix after the CDs were already pressed. Well, now they're able to you're able to go online to get those updates if there's any of those available. Here you'll enter in a product key. Now, starting with Windows Vista, you don't actually have to enter in a product key. This does not mean you're stealing this version of Windows. If you don't enter in a product key, then you cannot activate it either, so I'll clear both of these in this case. And this is often what I do in lab environments or test environments or classroom types of environments where I don't really intend for this to be a permanent installation of Windows. By clearing both of these, then, I will be able to use this operating system for 30 days before I have to activate it. Okay. Then I'll go ahead and click on Next, and again, I'm not going to enter the product key. It's telling me, that it's asking me if I'm sure I want to do that. I don't want to enter a product key, so I click on No. And then with Windows Vista, the product key has unique identifiers in it that tell the installation process which version of Windows you want to install. Since I didn't enter in a product key, there's no way for it to know which version of Windows I want. So I'll just go to the Ultimate. How about that? And then I commit that I have actually got the version that I purchased, so to speak, and then I click on Next. Then you'll have some license agreements, as always, that you have to agree to. Probably officially I should tell you that you should read through every word of this. I don't know anybody that ever has, except for like company lawyers or somebody like that. And then here's where I can choose to upgrade. Now here's where I'll just upgrade and it'll install. Really, what Windows Vista does is it takes your existing settings and it kind of shovels them off to the side. It copies them off to the side, so to speak. Then it does a clean installation. We still call it an upgrade because you keep all your settings and all your data. But it does an actual clean installation of Windows, and then it moves all those settings back into this edition of Windows. This is a cleaner upgrade process, if you will, than what we've had in previous versions of Windows. What I can also do is to install a clean copy of Windows and format the drive, and so forth. I can make changes to the partitions and the like. I'm going to choose the upgrade item. Then, as I mentioned earlier, there might be some things that are giving me problems but that will not stop the installation. That's exactly what that's telling me here. It's saying that I'm not going to be able to use MSN Explorer anymore because there's actually a different edition of that, as well as Windows Messenger. Okay, so that's kind of an old version. There's updated things now. I'm going to go ahead and click on Next because I know the installation will be fine in this case. Now, what will happen here is we won't see this all the way through to the end, I don't think, but it'll just copy the files, it'll gather files, expand files, it'll do the installation, it'll detect hardware, and it may reboot several times, and then in a few minutes you'll have a new installation, an upgrade of Windows XP to Windows Vista. Alright, now I also wanted to make available for you some upgrade paths and hardware requirements. I thought about making a table of all of this stuff, but Microsoft already has all of this online, so I've already gone ahead and opened up each one of these links, but it shows things, for example, like the upgrade path to Windows 2000, you'll need to know that. The hardware requirements for Windows 2000, you'll need to know that. You'll need to know all of these things. The upgrade path to XP, the hardware requirements there, and the upgrade and hardware requirements for Windows Vista as well. Once again, here I've also got these open for you so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. For example, for Windows 2000, you could upgrade from Windows 95 or 98, Windows 98 Second Edition, to Windows 2000, and then there's also server products down here, which are not really part of the A+ exam, but mostly the top of this part is what you would need to know then. And then, of course, you'll need to know the hardware requirements to go to Windows 2000 as well, and those appear down here. Now, also, you'll need to know XP in a practical sense. XP is much more likely to be what you're going to see in the real world, and we see some upgrade requirements here, upgrade paths here, as well as some system requirements that you'll see here as well. And then here's Windows Vista, as you can see here as well. And this shows you, again, what you can upgrade from and upgrade to. This is a little bit more clear than the other upgrade paths that we saw for the other operating systems. But regardless, they'll all get you there, and they'll all give you the information that you need. With this one, it will identify if you need to do a clean install, identified by the yellow dot, as opposed to a upgrade, which is possible, that you can see in the green dot. And then, of course, the minimum system requirements here as well. Now, one thing that I would keep in mind in particular notice here for Windows Vista is not just what you need to be able to perform the basic installation, which is kind of what we see up here under Home Basic, but also what you would need to do if you wanted to get arrow capability. Okay. In order to get the arrow capability, you'll need to have these supporting items that we see down here. In particular, the Windows Display Driver model, the WDDM driver model, DirectX 9 class graphics GPU. Most anything you buy nowadays is going to be that kind of a graphics adapter with Pixel Shader 2.0. Again, they'll all have that nowadays. It supports 32 bits per pixel, and it passes the Windows Arrow acceptance test in the Windows Driver Kit. That's the official version. Even if it doesn't pass that, the video card may still be capable of displaying Windows Arrow, but the recommendation is that it passes Microsoft's acceptance kit. And again, almost anything new that you buy right now is going to be able to fully support all of that. It's going to be more of an issue if you're upgrading an older machine and you might not be quite sure if it supports some of these things, and you would need to certainly double check. But anyway, this document that I originally referenced, this is called, the name of the file, it's available for you up on nuggetlab.com. It's called Windows Installation Requirements.pdf. In this nugget, we took a look at installations and, in particular, upgrades. We started off by taking a look at some upgrade considerations. For example, is the operating system that you want to install compatible with what they already have? Maybe the applications won't work under the new version of Windows. Well, you have to check that kind of thing out. And I showed you some tools, or a tool that you can look at that with. We also took a look at transferring the settings and the data. We're using things such as the File and Settings Transfer Wizard, Windows Easy Transfer, the User State Migration Tool. All of those sorts of things can get the job done for you here, depending on the version of Windows you're trying to upgrade to. And then we took a look at the upgrade paths as well. You can't always get from one existing operating system to the version that you want. You might have to leapfrog it, or you might have to migrate all their settings over somewhere else and then do a clean install as opposed to an actual upgrade. And then we looked at the hardware requirements as well, and both the upgrade paths and the hardware requirements are included in links that I provide for you up on nuggetlab.com. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.